Well, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for our new knowledge session. Today, my name is Sandy Ratliff. I'm with Virginia Community Capital, and we are happy to partner with the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator, and the town of Abington to offer this series of professional development workshops to new and existing businesses. If this is your first time and you're not familiar with this program, we started this in 2014 to support the Washington County Business Challenge, and it has become one of the longest running professional development workshops within the Commonwealth of Virginia, primarily too that it's free to businesses and community folks in the region. Now, before we get started and I introduce our presenter, I wanted to let you know that in order to keep this webinar flowing and to stay within our 1 hour time frame, we have muted everyone. However, we want to hear from you. This is a workshop to help you. So if you have questions for our presenter, please post those in the Q&A section, and we will address those at the end of the session. I am pleased to have Christine Lawson with State Farm Insurance with us today to share some information on some changes that have occurred as a result of the COVID. And for those business owners, hopefully there's some things tips that you could do that's going to help you. So, Christine, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to share more about State Farm and what you have to offer.
Well, hey, Sandy, thank you so much. It's humbling to be here. I really didn't think anybody would sign up. So the fact that there are a few people out there, of course, this is my life insurance. And so I kind of eat, breathe, drink it 24/7, one of those kind of nerdy data types. So I do have some visual to go along so you're not stuck with looking at me the whole time. But it's so great to be here, and I would love to know who is with us. So I can see a participant list of the attendees, and I recognize Jamie Barger, one of my own, who I understand is going to the dentist, so I think I'll probably lose out once you get there. But I tell you, I love working with Jamie, just an awesome all around. Jamie's a total package. I mean, family guy, tremendous work ethic, and also a tremendous service orientation. And I know Berea College was a big influence on him because it's mandatory, must work, right? In addition to attending classes. I see Jean Gallagher. Is this all right, Sandy, if I just call people's names out?
And that's up to you.
Hi, Jean. I don't know if you have audio or if you're muted, but good to see you here.
Yeah, we have everyone muted, but we do want feedback, and they can post those in the Q&A or the chat feature.
Okay, good. So logistically, use the Q&A or the chat. So welcome, Jean. Kevin Thayer, I know Kevin. Welcome, Kevin. Good to see you here. Mandy Archer, welcome. Mary Parsons, Misty Bandy. Did I miss anybody? Wow, I'm super humbled that that there are folks here. So awesome. Now, Sandy, will you watch the chat for me, or should I?
I certainly will. I'll watch the chat and the Q&A, and if there's questions that come in at the end, I'll definitely share those with you.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope I meet your expectations today. At least maybe you'll have an opportunity, of course, absolutely, to ask any questions. I will do my best to answer them when it comes to all things insurance and financial services. I'm not on the selling side anymore, but my information is on the screen. So if there's something that maybe you think of later, a question, an issue, please do keep my contact information. That's my work cell and my work email. Happy to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. And I'm happy to answer things. Sometimes people don't think of something they wanted to bring up or ask until afterwards. They've had some time to reflect. Totally fine. And of course, use the chat area or Q&A for anything. We're just going to keep it super casual. All right. Hey, a little bit about me. Since I'm new here and not everybody knows me, like everybody seems to know everybody else. From the big city of Baltimore, Maryland. I'm from there. I was born in D.C., raised in Baltimore, moved to Charlottesville, Virginia to go to college, um, and pretty much have spent the last 30 years in Charlottesville. So a few stints in retail as a buyer and also as in a retail store. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of Tallheimers or Hecht's. Both of those companies are gone due to mergers and acquisitions back in the 90s. A lot of the big box retailers, at your traditional malls, were merged and acquired by other companies. And in fact, May Corporation, this is Hex. They acquired Hex, and they promptly disassembled Hex. No longer exists. But boy, that was a time working at the mall, I guess, in the 90s. From there, I said, you know what? I don't ever want to be part of a merger acquisition and be on the doubtful side of that job ever again. So I'm going with a company that is not subject to stockholders, and it turned out to be State Farm Insurance. I got to stay in Charlottesville or go back to Charlottesville after spending a little time in Richmond and Northern Virginia. And I spent the last 27 years with State Farm in various capacities. So I do have the majority of my experience in operational training side related to life and health insurance claims. So major medical claims, disability claims. I actually handle disability claims from Charlottesville for West Virginia, Virginia, North Carolina. So I learned a little bit about coal and miners and the various health issues that afflict miners. I tell you what, and when I was just starting out in state farm and claims, and I was 23 or 24, I had no idea. You don't know unless you live in that world and you're exposed to it. So that was a very small view of what coal was like and what it did to folks' health, and it frankly, a little bit on the heartbreaking side. I'm sure from hundreds of miles away, it's easy for me to say that, but I was happy to write those checks for disability and for paying for medical care. And I was really happy that the agents had written those policies on them with what was coming, whether it was based due to lungs or due to a lot of back claims, a lot of disability due to back claims. So at any rate, that was a pretty formative experience, and it really I spent 7 years administering those claims, and that propelled me into becoming an agent and making sure I could take care of my people too. And I did that, had the pleasure and honor of doing that for 6 years in Charlottesville, downtown area. And then I was asked to train future agents, help kind of create the future in 5 states, 4 states in DC. And then I had the opportunity to take over for a mentor of mine, Don Carter, if anyone knows him. He was the agency sales leader for State Farm for many, many years here in Abingdon. And it's humbling to step in his shoes. That CLU, whomever you folks do business with when it comes to your insurance and financial services, this education piece is so important. So the CLU designation, it's kind of like a master's degree in life insurance planning. And this is from the American College, which is an accredited college up in Pennsylvania. So there are other designations that show the commitment of whomever you do business with to learning and staying abreast of the issues that are going on in our world. And I tell you what, when I first started out with insurance, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to snooze. But it has been by far the most gratifying thing. Second only to these kiddos on the next slide. So these are my daughters, Mackenzie on the left, Emma on the right. So I'm a UVA grad. Mackenzie is currently at James Madison University in Harrisonburg. And Emma just started at Penn State. So this is one of the few unmasked pictures. So with that said, they are having a very different experience, as we all are. So I look at this in kind of 3 views today, and that is looking at kind of the current state, looking at what can we learn from past big events, kind of like COVID is a big global event. What other past events can we kind of look at and maybe make some projections to look ahead and see, hey, are there going to be lasting implications of this? So, are there there are some things that seem like they're going to last. I mean, we all have all invested in a mask. I won't say that's a humongous financial strain, but we all have masks. Is it going to be long-standing or permanent? We don't know yet, of course, but certainly what will be permanent and what we'll have a lot of in the future looking back are going to be photos, whether they're on your social media or otherwise. There will be a lot of pictures that will remind us in case this doesn't last, doesn't have any long-standing effects. Then we'll have some memories where we'll look back at Christmas time and say, remember that Christmas when we all went to Cracker Barrel with our masks on and we had to sit, there were 20 of us in the family and we had to sit at 10 tables. So, will the shift in priorities be permanent? TBD. Okay, I think that's fair, and that should give us comfort, right? Because the fact that we have short memories when huge things happen, and we are resilient and we come back. So I don't know. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but nobody else does either. So let's talk current state. So information and data sources. This comes up every now and then. Where are we getting our data, and is it properly proofed? And how do you know? I would tend to err on the side of being a bit critical, not cynical, but critical of the source of data. And so early on in this COVID situation, what data is meaningful? Is it a credible source? And certainly we have our usual news sources. But social media, I think this is the biggest crisis situation since the real dawn of social media. I mean, certainly there was, I'm talking about global proportions. Even the financial crisis of 08, 09, there was social media, but it was not nearly, and obviously there was the World Wide Web, but there wasn't nearly as pervasive and the variety of sources of where people get information aside from cable news and traditional news sources, and then print. Of course, print is, going the way of the phone booth. So online largely, but also social media plays a prominent role. I would say this is probably the largest event on a global basis where social media takes on a pretty important role. So data sources are, make of it what you will, but I think a lot of people are looking at CDC as a credible source, as well as Johns Hopkins Hospital Medical Center site as being fairly credible. I'm not endorsing any one of them. It's just, this is an interesting kind of demonstration of who pays attention to what, right? And I would say the COVID situation is probably as controversial in conversation as politics right now. The maskers and the anti-maskers. So current state, we've got a lot of government and legislative action at the state. It started at the state level, right? And federal. So I'm going to talk a bit about that and then look at insurance impacts, personal as well as business. So if anyone here has a business, I'm going to dig into some of that because there have been some temporary things, but there could be some potential ongoing opportunities. A little bit about life and health. Those are very data driven as well. So we don't have any trends to identify yet in our industry. And I'm going to speak very high level, not simply about State Farm, obviously, but because we tend to be the largest and involved in so many different types. I do have a good amount of information. But hey, carrying on with the current state. So a lot of action by the states, right? There were, and boy, being so close to Tennessee, North Carolina, and Kentucky and West Virginia, right here in this part of the state, as opposed to Central Virginia, I was privy to a lot more information from the different border states about what they were doing, right? In Texas, or I'm sorry, in Tennessee, it was every person for him or herself. And early on, of course, that has shifted a bit. But there were these stay-at-home recommendations that turned into government orders, and we were paying attention to the news feeds because each governor was doing things a little bit differently. But again, social media was very helpful to get that information to folks. These stay-at-home orders, then they went to limiting how many people can be together in a group, in a building. Schools very quickly closed, right? There were government offices that closed. They transitioned to a virtual, although schools maybe not so much. The mask use came about, and it was kind of optional at first, and then it became mandatory. So early on, there was this designation, and I don't know if you guys remember this. I sure do. I know Jamie does. Which businesses can stay open by state and which have to close. And this variety is varied by state. That was got a little scary there, because every business is essential to the business owner and his or her family, as well as the employees and their families, right? Or else they wouldn't be there. And this is a little bit of a judgment call, right? Or a big judgment call. And this was a pretty stressful time. So you kind of, depending on if you were designated an essential business or not, there could be a long or short list. It generally favored large corporations who could make their case, had a lot of lawyers, large employers who could impact a local economy very significantly. And certain government services, of course, would be essential naturally. And insurance in every state was included as an essential business, right? This is very important because insurance is an important financial safety net. So someone gets sick outside of COVID, it can absolutely wipe you out financially in the absence of insurance. So it's a very important safety net, and that people can still transact with their insurance companies, let alone, driving, and that can, a major accident can absolutely wipe you out financially too. So making insurance essential. I know I'm a little biased here. Absolutely important, and part of kind of a societal need too. That is where the federal government got involved and passed the CARES Act, and there are a lot of sections on that, part of which was the PPP loans. This was designated specifically for businesses, and they're a type of loan that was very low interest, and in a lot of cases, this is going to end up being forgiven money that goes to businesses who have employees. The intent there was to keep folks employed. Weren't sure how long this was going to last, but if employers, small businesses could keep their employees getting a paycheck through that PPP loan, that would be a good thing, right? Of course, they did pass stimulus checks, enhance the unemployment benefits, and I think that has been a lively discussion on the unemployment benefit enhancements. I have heard from other business owners that this really hamstrung them from an employee point of view, because it's my understanding that the unemployment benefit could in many cases exceed what their compensation would be working. So I know of a lot of businesses, contractors, and who were really scratching their head over that kind of conflicting priority, right? You're trying to keep people employed, but yet when you enhance unemployment, people who could be working would rather take the bigger check. Can't say I blame them, right? So a lot of government action, right? And the states really drove the activity with the federal government allowing the states to do this. So as a business owner in the state of Virginia or West Virginia or Tennessee, you were really a bit at the mercy, right, of the state, of the governor, of the executive in charge. All right. So if we could bring it down to insurance, on the homeowner side again, we're still kind of in this state, so none of this is really predictive, but I did want to take an opportunity to share some of the data that I'm sure is the case at all insurance companies who do homeowners insurance and the like. So when people are at home through a stay-at-home order, or they've unfortunately lost their job, or they get to work from home as opposed to going into an office, there are going to be fewer claims because people are at home and they're paying attention to what's going on in their home. And they're going to be less severe claims because if that pipe does burst, people who are at home, they're going to be on it faster, right? And get it fixed and get it cleaned up faster. As opposed to you leave your home at 6 in the morning to commute to work, the pipe bursts at 6:15, you get home at 5 at night and the water's been there for 10 hours. if you're right there to catch it, it's going to be less severe. Um, and fewer claims because people are going to get out in front of doing some repairs while they're at home. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing. People are more connected with their home, and it also means that we don't, the homeowners insurance rates will be fairly stable. Not that it's 100% based on claims, but claims are a big part of what goes into an insurance rate on the property casualty homeowners and auto insurance side. Um, so if you haven't already, think about, or if you know somebody who's done some improvements to their home, adjustments, additions, renovations. With people spending more time at home, they care more about their environment, and maybe something that's been on the shelf they've decided to take on as a project or contract it out. It's been really hard to get a contractor, I know, for many people who want that help because they're so busy. Always make sure to go back to your insurance company and have them run a new replacement cost um, to accommodate the improvements that you've made, because uh, that would be reflected if, God forbid, something happens and your house burns down or is damaged or destroyed. You want to make sure that those new developments and renovations get added into the replacement, right? Look, pet adoptions are way up. People are fostering and getting more rescues and just getting more pets in general. The number one liability claim in all of the homeowners world, number one liability claim in the entire industry is dog bites. And as a parent of two daughters who both had neighbors' dogs bite them, um, I can attest that, yeah, I mean, we're kind of in there with it. So just keep that in mind, that dog bites are number one cause of liability. In other words, the reason people sue other people is because that person's dog bit them. It doesn't matter if it's not at home. You could be out on the creeper trail with your dog bites someone. That's a liability claim covered by your liability insurance, and MedPay if you have it on your homeowner's policy or renters. I wasn't, this one too soon to tell if that's going to change, if the claim trend is lower because people aren't really out and about as much with their dogs. Um, Although it could be offset by more people having dogs and more people having more dogs. Um, don't know yet, but I thought that was an interesting trend that I wanted to address. Um, so on the on the auto insurance side, I mean, obviously, if you're in a stay-at-home order and then work from home situation, you're not going to drive much. So this is impacting rates, and most of the major carriers, if not all, State Farm included, we are given refunds and reductions in their premium costs because of this, because of these trends. But let me start at the top. Stay on track here. Billing and payment grace for impacted people and change in employment situation. That's not just the insurance industry. We see that in banking and finance companies as well, where people can't make their payments, so that they get some grace, some extensions, maybe pay in more installments of smaller size, or even get their debt relieved. And that, the implications of that on someone's credit, obviously from an insurance point of view, it does not paying your insurance doesn't impact your credit. If we think about holistically in the world going forward from a financial point of view, credit is definitely something that will take a hit going forward. Department of Motor Vehicles, while they put a big old pause on license suspensions and other things that would normally be reported to insurance companies. So, that's going to benefit a lot of people who don't want those speeding tickets or haven't paid their for certain infractions. So that would normally impact someone's cost of insurance, but that's definitely taken a pause because the DMV has given a grace period. So, I mean, that can be a good thing, right? I mean, we don't want people driving around without licenses, but that probably happens anyway, right? And so this temporary rate reduction that probably everybody who is driving a car and has car insurance has recognized and realized and benefited from. Look, if there are less people out on the roads, either voluntarily or because they work from home, so they're not commuting. That means there's going to be less accidents and injuries. That's a good thing, right? And when there are less accidents and injuries, then there's less insurance claims, right? And so therefore, those what would have been paid in claims is refunded to the customers to benefit from that. So, but hey, it goes down, it will normalize. And we're already seeing, based on our telematics, that people are driving more miles on the weekends. Weekend miles are almost at the level of pre-COVID, but commuter miles haven't come back yet. So just recognize, everybody who has car insurance, if it's gone down due to COVID factors, it will normalize at some point. We're having to rely on technology. If anybody on this line has had a claim during this period, I'd be interested to hear if technology was more in use. Certainly, I can imagine that customers and vendors and contractors may be a little bit hesitant to be as face-to-face as we used to, handshake and hand over a check in person. I mean, I love those days. I want to go back to those days, but this is causing some acceleration use of technology for claims filing and handling, for example. Mobile devices and apps are the way to go. You can take pictures, upload documents. It's just a much more efficient and effective means of communication, and I think it's accelerated by COVID and people not meeting face to face. So I do want to kind of pause there. Let's see. I can probably check if there are any questions or anything in the chat.
I don't see anything at this time.
No? Okay. All right, cool. All right. So business insurance, if anyone here is a business owner or knows someone or related to someone, I'll tell you what, early on in this, when the work from home, a lot of businesses were reevaluating their real estate needs. Why do we need a giant office space for office work? Now, certainly that depends on the type of business. But going forward, that is a huge overhead expense that I can see a lot of companies wanting to take a look at. And maybe it means they relocate. And I would think Southwest Virginia would be a fantastic place, very affordable cost of living and incredibly affordable cost of doing business compared to, I've lived in Baltimore, DC, Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Charlottesville. And they're far more expensive places to do business. My business was in Charlottesville. And it was incredibly expensive and competitive to do business there. So I really appreciate the cost of living down here and from a business perspective as well. But it's all relative, right? However, do you necessarily, as a business owner, need that Main Street high cost location for certain businesses? If a lot of businesses are moving online or could move online, that could be a permanent repercussion of COVID and not necessarily a bad thing. It probably accelerated people who are looking more at technology anyway. But if you have altered where you do business, then you absolutely need to look at your business insurance coverage, your physical location coverage, or if you're a tenant, your equipment, how much space you're using, certainly your payroll. Business insurance is based on a number of factors, and payroll is one of them. The greater need for equipment and technology, we're having a laptop shortage, right? Not to mention our challenges with broadband and network access and stability of those lines with more people using more bandwidth. And I had an education recently on this from CenturyLink as well as Verizon on the use it, how many devices will use up all of your bandwidth in your home office. But anyway, when there's an increase in business stuff like laptops and headsets and those kinds of things, routers related to business, then those are needs that you want to have reflected properly in your business insurance, like in the property component. And then there are these platforms: Zoom, Skype, WebEx, SharePoint Online, Live Oak, etc. I'm sure there's a million more. Those have been good things, but that technology means people don't necessarily need to be around each other, and that may continue going forward. Not in every business and not in every situation, but I definitely can see some businesses wanting to do that, because then all of a sudden you can handle and insurance, like the whole state of Virginia, becomes much more small and manageable. So if there are customers over in Newport News, what does it matter? They don't need to drive to Abingdon to do business. We can do business over our Live Oak system and have a webinar just like this. So employee scenarios, a lot of liability, workers' comp situations, they're related to being on site, on a work site. So if we're remote working and you're working from home, there's much less physical liability risk, which is really good, right? At the same time, there's less monitoring. So that's one thing that business owners is a concern on the accountability front. Yeah. This essential and non-essential business designation, if that is a concept, I think we would all hope that would go away in a post-COVID world. But there's a dilemma for a business owner, right? How do you know going into business this is essential? Well, now we kind of have a precedent set, right? You can go back to those West Virginia, Tennessee governor orders and see what were those lists, who was on those lists, what was considered, and it sort of sanctioned by the government as essential. That might be the direction that people go for employment in the future. Employer liability. So I don't know if you guys felt this, but I definitely felt for my small business owners, my agents, as well as all business owners who have employees. Moderating the risk to yourself and your family as a business owner, and then your employees and their families, right? And then customers and their contacts too. You have the business need and then you have the human need. So the new lawsuits that have come up are where employees who have been exposed to COVID and have even contracted it, sadly, they have a strong position from a lawsuit point of view against the employer who mandated that they come in, or who wasn't flexible and didn't adapt to it, or that's very problematic, and that's going to be an increase in liability. So I really do feel for small business owners who have a business to run and also have the potential of these lawsuits. So that's something that I don't know that particular one's going to go away. There's also going to be an increase to cleaning and sanitation needs. I know of a few business owners who have upped the rent on rental property to accommodate the increased cost of themselves being a landlord for cleaning and sanitation of their rental property, for one. Boy, that was a lot on one slide, wasn't it? A few others. So just a little bit of brass tacks here. So a lot of questions for folks who have business insurance. This is a different disruption than a derecho or a tornado or a hurricane, right? Or snowmageddon. Business interruption does not extend to a couple things that we've experienced. Obviously, to a global pandemic, that is not a listed cause of loss, covered cause of loss for insurance purposes. It certainly is a reality. But just because a business closes by governor order, or you lose customers because no one comes into your business or does business with your particular business or not, that's your business was interrupted, your income revenue was interrupted. However, the cause of that was due to the pandemic is not a covered loss in insurance contracts today. It also, if the government mandates is not, non-essential businesses must close, as also not trigger the coverage for business interruption insurance, which means the insurance pays the business owner for that loss of revenue. So that coverage, and I'm not saying that wouldn't change in the future, but that clearly is a big deal for a lot of smaller business owners, right? Um, so I know that COVID didn't cause a lot of the civil unrest and riots, but I did want to take this opportunity to bring this up. I think we were very, very blessed, and we benefited from living where we are, not having that civil unrest and the riots related to all of the civil unrest around Black Lives Matter and the shootings and the police activity. And this is not going political, I promise you, but one of the unfortunate repercussions was during these civil unrest and riot situations that businesses and buildings would be damaged significantly during these events, unfortunately. And those are actually excluded for in most business contracts, unfortunately. So it turned out that the folks who were rioting were actually destroying businesses that the business owners, they would have had to pay for all those repairs out of their own pocket. So it actually hurt a whole lot more, and it hurt people they didn't intend to hurt. If that makes sense. So sadly, I'm glad it wasn't here, but it did bring to light that, gosh, folks who go out there and, I'm not saying don't do your civic duty, but certainly if it's going to get destructive, you're really hurting your own community a whole lot more when that happens, because insurance does not unfortunately cover it. All right, life and health impacts for now, certainly because COVID is a medically a health-related situation, there will be repercussions. So right now I can tell you, just State Farm has paid almost $70 million in life insurance claims. Almost 2,000 of our customers have passed away so far since end of March, which is terrible. And I looked at the data, and then it compared it with the CDC data, and it's tracking along with the demographic information, where it's heavily impacting folks who are older and not nearly as much the younger folks. So no existing contracts are impacted. I mean, these are non-cancelable, guaranteed renewable contracts. So no significant changes have occurred. COVID is considered as any other sickness. Now, new contracts, most major companies, business as usual, issuing them, have not changed eligibility, aside from if they're symptomatic, right? So there's a few COVID related if someone is symptomatic, and most major companies have a process, okay? They follow a process of interview and potential medical exam. So they're business as usual there for the most part, but some smaller companies have stopped or limited issuance of new contracts, but not really any big news there yet. Health insurance, nothing significant to existing contracts today yet. Increases in testing, of course, and so they've had to, preventative things usually aren't covered by insurance are going to be covered more, and depending on who your insurance with, if it's a group medical or an individual medical, your own policy may make a change to cover that proactively or preventatively or screening, right? But there's definitely more tests, and these things have if they're not covered by health insurance, then people may not have them done as much, sadly. But I expect, and we expect to see significant healthcare related costs obviously to go up, and that will show up in future premiums for health insurance. Maybe not so much on the disability side, because this is not seen as a long-term debilitating, although that could change as well if certain folks have a reaction to it that's ongoing, or if you're a compromised individual and you have immunocompromised or you have asthma, then it may be more debilitating, but it's not necessarily, do we see any trends in our disability yet, right? But definitely on the medical reimbursement side. So any questions yet? Did I put anyone to sleep?
No, but I've made my own questions ready for when it's time.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, yeah. chime right in. So I think a little perspective here, because being in the insurance business, we have a lot of experience with catastrophes as defined. And I tell you, COVID is a catastrophe that is unlike any other from most people's perspective, but also from insurable and insurance related. If I think back to the insurance crisis or the financial crisis of 08, 09, and I want to recommend movie recommendation, The Big Short with Christian Bale and Steve Carell, great movie. And then you will understand about mortgage-backed securities so much better, and AM Best and Standard & Poor's rating companies with that movie. But at any rate, that financial crisis, that's considered the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And there was similarities in that the federal government included some stimulus and bailouts. Now that was more to the large financial firms. It also took some kind of pseudo-governmental agencies, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, under their wing, and they back 60% of home mortgages today, even still. They created this TARP fund that did end up helping some individuals, mostly because it was funneled through banks, to help people make their payments or give them some relief from their payments or interest rates. Then Dodd-Frank, of course, they're going to pass legislation going forward, and that is a permanent legislation unless repealed. So it wasn't a temporary measure with some stress testing to make sure of the financial viability and solvency of banks, right? So lasting wise, though, people lost home values like crazy. The retirement accounts that may have had mortgage-backed securities in them or were in the big banks suffered on paper or in actuality if folks liquidated or those companies went out of business, right? There was absolutely a global impact. There were changes to getting a mortgage that was tightened up, and you did have to actually have a down payment, right, and pretty good credit and income. The appraisal process changed significantly. Investment and securities rating changed significantly. Compliance oversight, it became more heavily regulated. And frankly, it got rid of some bad actors in insurance, banking, and investments, because it's harder to become professionals in those lines of work today than it was pre-2008. So it's much harder to be an investment advisor today than it was 12 years ago. I think that's actually a good thing. I think when you have a stringent standard, a high standard, both to get into that business, to learn and train, and then continuing ongoing education with testing and oversight, I actually think that's a good thing. If you're serious about it, you'll stay with it and you'll do it as a calling. So, I mean, that was like a really big crisis that affected things global. There were a lot of credit implications. Credit has definitely taken a more prominent role, and credit is part of the insurance process too. We used to think just of credit as just being for banking and credit cards. And if I want to buy a car, if I want to buy anything that I need to borrow money, it's not just for those products. If you think about it now, it's also involved in employment. Employers are doing credit checks. Many of them are. Utilities, when I moved here 3 years ago and went to get my utilities connected, they ran a credit check to see if I needed to make a deposit. A cell phone companies will run your credit to get a cell phone plan. Landlords, if you want to rent, many landlords will run a credit check to make sure that you can pay your rent in a timely manner. And insurance, absolutely. The main carriers and the minor carriers are using components of credit in insurance rate making. And almost all states allow it. There are a few states who don't allow credit in insurance, Maryland being one of them. And I'm going to say yet because the data is predictive. So there's certain components of credit. There's not a credit score that is available to agents and insurance reps. However, certain components of credit, such as timely payments and how much debt to income ratio, those kinds of things. If you've leveraged your credit significantly, if you open up a lot of accounts and then cancel a lot of accounts, there's certain components that are highly predictive to insurance activity. Um, and as controversial as that sounds, this has been in effect for over 10 years. So it's happening, and I know it's probably not new to anybody on the line, but that's one thing that became much more prevalent after this financial crisis. Oh, I need to work on my font for that title. All right, so we should be looking at, okay, here's another catastrophe. And this one is definitely one that impacts insurance as well. If you remember 15 years ago, almost exactly, Hurricane Katrina hit mostly New Orleans. So the largest insured event in history, certainly in state farms. And so private and federal insurance came together there to cover things. So especially around floods, which was a large part of the damage that was done. Wind and water were the two main ones there. But a lot of implications for insurance from that catastrophe. Now, if we're talking a fire insurance, homeowners or a building, flood is going to be a government program if you opt into it, but you have to get it yourself and pay for it. Private insurance doesn't cover rising surface water, but will cover it if it comes in through a hole in the roof from the tree that fell, or your roof was taken away, water comes in, covered. When it comes to cars, flood, as long as you have comprehensive, it's covered. Damage or replacement. And interestingly, that before we had a widespread use of drones, State Farm paid, I want to say, 50 or 60,000 car claims in one day, just based on an aerial photography, location mapping, and OnStar, people who had OnStar or similar devices in their cars. And we could locate, okay, yeah, they're definitely down there under that flood area in the French Quarter somewhere. Here's your check. So, we used a little bit of technology, not nearly as much as we can use now, but it accelerated the use of technology for sure. All right, so let's look ahead. I know I just have a few minutes left. I definitely can see more remote employees. I think employees will advocate for this. Some employees will not. Some employees can't wait to get back into the workplace for social and other reasons. Less commuter miles driven, less injuries, accidents, less claims that pay less for insurance. Those trends are the number one thing that our executives and insurance executives are monitoring in the auto insurance arena. The telematics use, this means reporting mileage. How much do you drive? Absolutely, it's becoming more of a pay-as-you-go system anyway in auto insurance. It's kind of exciting. One size does not fit all. So if you guys have a telematics program through your current insurer, it's absolutely informing what's going on out there during COVID. It's super interesting. And a whole lot bigger than just my trip to Food City. So that's going to continue. And younger folks, frankly, who don't want to pay a lot of money for insurance when they don't use their car very much, especially city folk, as I used to be, they're more interested in, hey, I just want to pay by the mile if I can. I wonder personally, this is personal, this third bullet point, is there going to be less demand for cars? Is the less demand right now for cars, is there going to be a pent up repercussion later, and we'll see more of that? Is the pent up demand for cars being replaced by campers and boats? As people think about ways to staycation versus flying anywhere, or will there be more cars purchased later? I just wonder if they're going to be as big a demand for expensive cars. Or if there'll be more ride sharing, especially in more urban areas. And then on the homeowner side, if you work from home, if this continues and becomes more widespread, the equipment, who owns that? Who insures it? Who's responsible for it? Definitely don't want to blend your personal and business stuff on one computer. You want to keep that very separate. Also, if more work from home, would anyone have a reason to go visit that remote employee who's related to the business, so a customer or a vendor? I think that could be extremely problematic if that continues for liability reasons, as well as property damage reasons, theft. That would give me pause in a remote work situation that would be ongoing. I mentioned the potential impact on finances and credit for all insurance, property and casualty insurance, and all companies for sure. Um, so this one, I think, is one. Oh, let me go back. All right. I know this is a busy slide, and I know we're wrapping it up here, but I tell you what, from a business owner point of view and business insurance, the government actions and orders, not insurable. Okay. If I have to think about, okay, if I own a business or I'm involved in a business, what's insurable? What can I transfer to insurance company, and what do I need to manage myself? Anything the government can do when it comes to situations like this out of your control, and you're going to have to manage that risk by, I would say, emergency fund is the first thing that comes to mind. Make sure you are diversified enough, and also that your business tends to transcend these events, such as the financial crisis, such as COVID. We're not really in a hurricane area, so we're good on that one. Look at your policy carefully, what triggers a loss of income, because a global pandemic is not something, I don't see that changing, although it might, because the likelihood of it happening again, I would say it may not change because we don't have enough data. We don't have enough data. The last time there was a global pandemic was about 100 years ago, and that was before impacts on insurance and sophisticated insurance models were obviously around. A business continuity plan is something that I had as an agent. So what happens if there's a giant snowstorm and we can't get to the office, right? What happens if there is a tornado or a big storm and our connectivity and internet and phone service is disrupted? So business disruption can look different depending on the type of business. I have a template and some ideas if anybody out there is interested. Always keep a team of experts on your side. Have a CPA. The CPAs were essential in helping my agents and other business owners determine what is this PPP program? Do I have to pay it back? When do I have to pay it back? Under what conditions do I not need to pay it back? How many of my employees do I need to keep? How much is apportioned of that for overhead expenses aside from salaries? A CPA is your best friend. An attorney is your best friend when it comes to labor contracts and your liability, especially with remote workers, if that's a change for you. And of course, risk analysis and management by your insurance professional. So I know I'm going over here. I will pause here and take any questions. I'll leave this slide up because I do think that there is some hope in any giant obstacle. I highly recommend the book by Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way. When things get in our way, what opportunities and windows does it open? So, Sandy.
Okay, we've got a question first from Jean Gallagher. For those companies who have employees working from home, how does that affect the employer's liability policy when it comes to workers' comp insurance?
Yeah, no kidding. So for a small business, if you have, I think in Virginia, you have to have work comp if you have 3 employees or more, right?
Yes.
But the business owner can opt out. Yeah, this is very problematic. This is where you need to talk to your lawyer because it is possible. If we're still doing computer work, it does depend on the kind of work, but if you're doing computer work, there's still ergonomic issues. Carpal tunnel used to be a big thing in the 90s. I don't know that it's that much now, but you're not overseeing and monitoring. You don't know the risks and what the environment is at home. This can be very problematic. I would urge employers to talk with your employees. Can we look at the home situation? What can be done to make it a workable, usable space dedicated to just this business? This is a very important partnership. I would absolutely get with there's so many lawyers in Abingdon. It's almost as many as in Charlottesville. There have to be some folks in contract law and labor law who can help with this. If it's going to be ongoing, so that person has to take responsibility. Employee, you have to take some personal responsibility. But what's required it really blends the lines, right? Because if I go into the kitchen and I trip on my rug, well, I went in the kitchen to get a snack, but I'm working, right? Is that a workers' comp? I don't think so. I mean, it's my home. I need to maintain it safely anyway. But that is, oh boy. If there's a specific scenario, Jean, I'd love to hear about it.
Okay, I've got a question. If you own a business that requires employees to enter homes or areas with people, should
Mhm.
they make changes or enhancements to their current policies to reflect COVID?
100% yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot more context. I think I would take a buddy, if at all possible. Um, I think that's in a safety precaution anyway. I would take someone with if at all possible. I know that's not possible or feasible in some areas. Um, it's crazy world out there. I would definitely buddy up if at all possible. I think there would be much more need to put context around here's what I'm going to be doing. So if it's an inspection of some type, let's say it's an appraisal or a pest inspection, to share up front, okay, here's what I'm going to be doing. Here's the areas that I need to be in. Or if it's a paper exchange, are there ways to make a paper exchange where maybe you need a document signed and then given back, and it can't be done over a software platform, then have an envelope. You keep the envelope, the pen is inside, you keep the pen, and just I'll take the documents back. Boy, everything looks so sanitized, or could look so sanitized, people wearing gloves and almost like someone has the plague, but we know we want to keep everyone safe. More context and more explanation, and having gloves and using envelopes and giving the pen away is so important because of that perception. You don't want to have anyone be fearful that they could catch something if for some reason you could be contact traced and not know it, and then have exposed someone that you saw in person in the time before, right? You don't want to foment a kind of hysteria. You want to have that respectful communication. So talking more about the precautions you've made in advance and why we're doing it this way, it is much more beneficial and much more rational, frankly. But again, I want to make sure that I hit to the intent of what your question was.
I guess what I was thinking more of, not like from a safety precaution that somebody's going to hit you over the head, but I was thinking about how to protect my employees from the COVID virus going into a home to do a repair or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, because now the, the odds are higher that you could get the virus. But I'm the employer and I'm saying, you've got to go do this. So I guess I'm
Yeah.
wanting to figure
So,
out, should I change my
yeah.
policy?
This is a great question. I would encourage everyone on the line if you've got an opinion on this. So where it's mandatory, is that employer willing to lose an employee who has some misgivings or is immunocompromised or has a spouse who is fearful or immunocompromised, right? So communication up front, what am I expected to do? And under what circumstances can I decline a job? Like if there are 15 people in a house and I have to go in under the kitchen sink and there's people all around, can I decline that job? Or what can I do to make that a doable job? What can I say to a client? Um,
Or I was just thinking, can you require before the work is done, before you go to the residence, they require that, only one person is allowed in the room, that if it's, to protect our employees. And if
yeah,
there's something that they compromise it, then I, as the employer, can go after them for not. That's what I was thinking of.
no, and you think about we have to wear masks in public business places, but not at home, right? So if I go into someone's home and I have a mask as a vendor, contractor, but the homeowner doesn't, can I ask them to do so? And what if they say no?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, yeah. I mean, we used to look out for things like, do they have dogs? When I used to do inspections as an agent, I'd say, okay, if there's there a dog loose somewhere around, and am I going to get tetanus from stepping onto this porch next to if it's railing that's older or unsteady, different risks. But this is a risk that is so unpredictable, right? You can't see it. Um, it is definitely a different deal. That's a really good question. Communication and then debrief after the interaction, right? So once someone's had an interaction and home visit, what happened, go back to the business and the other employees and talk about it.
Jean has another comment, nothing specific. However, I know that Virginia workers' comp rules were different than Tennessee. So if you have a Virginia business, but Tennessee employees working from home, not sure how accidents can be monitored or reported.
Yeah, that's, boy, you really do need a lawyer for that. I tell you, take care of yourself up front. Always good to know sooner rather than later. I think this is expanded for business owners. It's different for every employee relationship, but some employees like it. They like the flexibility of being able to, even pre-COVID. It was working moms, for example, need that flexibility at the same time. Now that it may be more permanent or more formal, I think it's going to bring up these very important issues. And so having a team of experts around you is super important.
And I just wanted to mention you noted about having a continuity plan in place. And we have been over the last 11 weeks, I've been doing a session each week on developing your resiliency plan and all aspects that goes into that, which is the same almost as your continuity plan. Tomorrow's session 12, we'll talk about communications and have a communications plan in place should another pandemic crisis happen. So if there's someone that's missed those, I highly recommend that you can go to Virginia Community Capital's Facebook page and watch it, or we also have a YouTube channel that they can watch that whole series. And we've got some examples too, but that covered everything from transportation, the logistics to legal issues, you name it, we've included it. So it's something that if businesses haven't done, they should really strongly evaluate sitting down and doing this. Just like when they started their business, developing their business plan, they need to be prepared now and not be like so many others not prepared when this pandemic. And we don't know what the future holds, but it's obvious that those that were prepared before the pandemic have been able to ride this recession out a lot easier than those that were just going from month to month to try to make bills. So we are running low on time. I want to thank you, Christine, for taking the time to, I know you've got a lot on you. You've got a busy schedule, so I appreciate you sharing your expertise today. I also want to thank all the guests that took the time to watch this session. We do this every other Wednesday, and it's our goal each time we do these is to share some tips and some ideas and resources to help businesses grow, not only in Washington County, but in the state of Virginia. You will be able to see this later today up on the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubators Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/new knowledge. We have probably close to 120 workshops that are on there online from every topic that you could think of. It's a great resource. You get stuck, you can't find someone to help, just go there, find it, and watch that. So I highly recommend that you look at that. Our next session will be held on, get my eye on it, on November the 4th, and it's going to focus on financial literacy, which is pretty important in this age, a pandemic that we've gone through. And Cindy Fields with the Virginia Highlands Small Business Development Center will be leading that session. Again, if there's anything that we can do, please let us know. You've got my contact information if you have a question. And again, I will be posting Christine's slides up on the Incubators Facebook session, and as well as I will send you the slides that she did today. So thanks for joining us, and I hope that you can come back and join us again. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.